I left Sacramento the week after I had a panic attack in the Target break room and walked out halfway through my shift. Just stood up from the metal folding chair where I'd been eating string cheese and left my vest on the hook. Didn't clock out. Didn't tell anyone. The break room had fluorescent lights that buzzed in this specific way that made my teeth hurt. I'd been staring at a poster about workplace safety, something about lifting with your knees, and my chest got tight. Really tight. The kind where you can't tell if you're breathing wrong or if breathing just stopped working the way it's supposed to. My hands went numb and I thought maybe I was dying, which sounds dramatic, but that's what it felt like. Everything got far away and too close at the same time. I walked out through the back hallway past the stockroom and pushed through the employee exit into the parking lot. It was a Tuesday, 4 in the afternoon. The air outside was warm and flat and smelled like asphalt. I sat in my car for maybe 20 minutes trying to make my lungs work right again, and then I drove to my apartment and didn't go back. Jasmine called me that night, my supervisor. She left a voicemail asking if I was okay and if I was coming in for my next shift. Professional voice, but a little annoyed. I didn't pick up. She called again the next day. Twice. Then she texted, "Marshall, I need you to respond. Let me know your status." I read it and put my phone face down on the kitchen counter. She kept trying for 3 days. The messages got shorter and more clipped. By the end of the week, she just sent, "Your last check will be mailed. Return your badge if you still have it." I still had it. It was in my jacket pocket. I never sent it back. Michelle started texting around the same time. My sister. She's 3 years older and she's always kept tabs on me, which I get, but sometimes it's too much. "Hey, haven't heard from you in a bit. Everything good?" Then, "Marshall, seriously, just let me know you're alive, LOL." Then, "Okay, this isn't funny anymore. Call me." I didn't call her. I didn't know what I'd say. She'd ask what happened and I'd have to explain the panic attack and walking out, and then she'd want to fix it. She's like that. She'd tell me to go back and apologize or find another job right away or come stay with her in Portland until I figured things out. I didn't want to do any of that. I just wanted to stop feeling like my skin didn't fit right. So, I ghosted her. That's the word for it. I felt bad about it, but not bad enough to answer. I spent most of that week in my apartment, eating freezer burritos and avoiding my phone. Rent was paid through the end of the month, and I had maybe $800 in my account. I knew I needed a plan, but every time I tried to think about what came next, my brain went static. On day 6, I walked to a coffee shop 2 blocks over because I needed to get out, and my apartment didn't have internet. The coffee shop was called Brew Haven, and it was the kind of place with chalkboard menus and succulents on every table. I ordered a drip coffee and sat in the corner with a laptop I'd borrowed from a guy I used to work with at a warehouse job. He didn't know I'd borrowed it. I'd grab it from his place when he wasn't home and planned to return it the same way. Probably not great, but I needed it more than he did right then. I opened Craigslist. I wasn't sure what I was looking for exactly. Just something different. Something that wasn't retail or warehouses or anywhere with a lot of people. I scrolled through listings for roommate situations and delivery gigs and casino work in Reno. Nothing felt right. Then I saw it. Seasonal caretaker, remote coastal station, housing provided, minimal interaction. It was posted by some government agency, U.S. Coast Guard Facilities Management. The listing was bare bones, just said they needed someone to maintain a small residential property adjacent to an active station on the Oregon coast through winter. Duties included basic cleaning, minor repairs, grounds upkeep, stipend plus free housing, must pass background check. Contact Josephine Cross with resume and references. The phrase minimal interaction stuck with me. I didn't have a resume, not a real one. But I opened a blank document and typed up something basic. Listed the warehouse job, and Target, and a landscaping gig I'd done for 2 months the year before. Made it sound more impressive than it was. For references, I put down the warehouse supervisor and a guy named Tom, who I was pretty sure would say I was fine if anyone called. I sent the email before I could overthink it. Didn't expect to hear back. But Josephine Cross replied 6 hours later. Marshall, thank you for your interest. The position is still available. We can offer a 6-month contract beginning November 15th, stipend of $1,000 per month plus housing and utilities. Duties are straightforward. Attached is the full listing and contract draft. Please confirm your availability and provide a phone number for a brief preliminary call. Best, Josephine Cross, Administrative Assistant, District 13 Facilities. I read it 3 times. $1,000 a month wasn't much, but if housing was covered, I could make it work. And 6 months sounded manageable, finite. I could do anything for 6 months. I replied with my number and said I was available. She called the next morning. Her voice was calm and efficient. She asked if I had experience with basic maintenance and if I was comfortable working independently in a rural location. I said yes to both, which wasn't totally true but wasn't totally a lie either. She said the background check would take a week and she'd send the contract once it cleared. It cleared. The contract showed up in my email on November 8th. I signed it digitally and sent it back. Josephine replied with directions and a start date. November 15th, 10 days away. The station was at Heseda Head, just outside Florence, Oregon, about 5 hours north along the coast. I gave notice on my apartment, packed my stuff into 2 duffel bags, and left Sacramento on the 14th. Didn't say goodbye to anyone. I got to Heseda Head late afternoon on the 15th. The drive up Highway 101 had been gray and wet, the ocean appearing and disappearing behind hills and pine trees. The directions Josephine sent were specific. I turned off the highway onto a narrow access road that climbed through dense forest, then opened up to a stretch of clifftop clearing. The station sat near the edge, a cluster of white buildings with red roofs, clean and official looking. I could see a tall tower and some kind of equipment array. The main gate was open, but there was a small guardhouse that looked empty. I kept driving. The Caretaker duplex was further down the access road, closer to the cliff edge. It was a 2-story building, older than the main station but maintained. White paint, dark green shutters. It faced the ocean directly. Past it, I could see another structure, smaller, set back from the cliff. That one had chains across the door and a sign I couldn't read from the car. I parked in the gravel lot next to the duplex, killed the engine. The wind hit me the second I opened the door, cold and damp and carrying the salt smell of the ocean. I could hear gulls and waves crashing somewhere below the cliff, but the sound was muffled by distance and wind. And then I heard the foghorn, deep and low. It thumped through the air, vibrating in my chest. Lasted maybe 3 seconds, then cut off. I stood there waiting to see if it'd go again. It didn't. The duplex had 2 front doors side by side. Josephine's email said the left unit was mine. The right one was storage, locked off season. I grabbed my duffel bags from the trunk and the 2 bags of groceries I'd picked up in Florence. Walked up the short path to the left door. There was a lockbox mounted next to the frame. Josephine had sent the code. 3729. I punched it in, and the box clicked open. Inside was a single key on a plain metal ring. The door unlocked easy. Inside it smelled like dust and wood cleaner. The front room was small, a couch, a chair, a wood stove in the corner. The walls were plain white, scuffed in places. There was a kitchenette to the right, 2-burner stove, mini fridge, sink. A hallway led to the back where I figured the bedroom and bathroom were. It was cold. Not freezing, but enough that I could see my breath a little. I set the groceries on the counter and dropped my bags by the couch. Walked to the window. The ocean stretched out, flat and gray, under a sky that was the same color. No horizon line, just gray blending into gray. The cliff dropped off maybe 30 yards from the building. I couldn't see the bottom from where I stood. To the left, I could make out the other building, the one with the chains. I could read the sign now, Hecate Head Lighthouse Museum, closed for season. Made sense. Off-season on the coast. No tourists. The foghorn sounded again, same low thump. I felt it in the floorboards. I checked my watch, 3:47. The place wasn't truly empty, that was obvious. The station was active, the foghorn running. But it felt empty. That was close enough. I unpacked the groceries first. Canned soup, bread, peanut butter, coffee, pasta, a box of granola bars. Put it all away in the cupboard and fridge. Then I unpacked my duffel bags. Clothes in the bedroom dresser. Toiletries in the bathroom. Laptop and charger on the small desk in the corner of the front room. The bedroom had a twin bed with plain sheets and a wool blanket. One window facing the ocean. The bathroom had a shower with decent pressure and a mirror that was clean but spotty around the edges. It was basic. It was fine. I made coffee on the 2-burner stove using a dented pot I found in the cupboard. No coffee maker, but I could make it work. While the water heated, I looked around for anything that needed immediate attention. The wood stove had kindling and logs stacked beside it. I'd need to figure out how to work that. The floors were clean, but the baseboards had dust. The windows were streaked with salt spray on the outside. Simple stuff. Tasks I could control. The coffee finished. I poured it into a chipped mug and sat on the couch. My phone was in my pocket, but I didn't take it out. No missed calls. I'd turned off notifications 2 days ago. The rain started while I sat there. Light at first, then heavier. It streaked down the windows and made everything outside blur together. The foghorn thumped again. I finished the coffee and got up. I needed to keep moving. That was the trick. Don't sit too long. Don't let the static creep back in. I found cleaning supplies under the sink. A sponge, some kind of all-purpose spray, a rag. I wiped down the kitchen counter and the stovetop, scrubbed the sink, swept the floor with a broom that was leaning in the corner. The motions were automatic. I didn't have to think about them. After that, I worked on the wood stove. There were instructions printed on a laminated card stuck to the wall next to it. I followed them step by step. Crumpled newspaper, kindling, 2 logs. Lit it with matches from a box on the mantel. The fire caught on the second try. The warmth spread slowly. I stood there watching the flames for a while, then went back to the kitchen and made pasta. Boiled it in the same pot I'd used for coffee, drained it in the sink, ate it plain with a fork while standing at the counter. Outside, the rain kept coming and the foghorn kept sounding, every few minutes, regular, predictable. I washed the pot and fork, wiped down the counter again, checked the time, 6:23. It was full dark outside now. I could see my reflection in the window, thin and washed out against the black. I threw another log on the fire and watched it settle into the coals. I didn't have anything else to do. No TV, no internet at the duplex, just me and the sound of rain and the foghorn. I brushed my teeth and changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt. Got into bed. The sheets were cold and smelled a little like storage, but the wool blanket was heavy and warm. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind rattle the window frame. My phone was still in my jeans pocket on the floor. I thought about checking it. Didn't. The foghorn sounded again, muffled through the walls, but still present. I counted the seconds between blasts. Somewhere around 4 minutes, regular enough that I could predict it. That helped. I closed my eyes and focused on the rhythm. 4 minutes, thump. 4 minutes, thump. Simple, predictable. Something I could control just by knowing when it was coming. I fell asleep like that. The first couple days I just settled in. That was it. Sweeping the walkways between buildings, checking exterior locks, making sure the lighthouse lamp switch worked when I flipped it. Simple stuff. Routine. The fog didn't really lift. It sat there thick and wet, making everything feel closer than it probably was. I could hear the ocean, but couldn't always see it. The air tasted like salt and something heavier, maybe just moisture. My jacket stayed damp no matter how long I left it inside. I kept busy. That was the main thing. I had a list in my head: walkways, locks, lamp switch, check the generator shed door, walk the perimeter fence. I did it twice a day, morning and afternoon. It gave me something to count. Thinking too much felt dangerous. That's what had happened at Target, I figured. Too much sitting still in that break room with nothing to do but notice my chest getting tight and my hands going numb. Out here I could move, I could sweep, I could check things. The tasks were small and clear, and they didn't require me to talk to anyone or smile or pretend I was fine. On the third day, maybe 4 in the afternoon, I heard a truck coming up the access road. I was outside the main station building with a broom, clearing leaves and pine needles off the front walkway. The engine sound carried through the fog before I saw anything. Then a white government truck with a Coast Guard emblem on the door pulled into the gravel lot and parked near the tower. A guy got out, older than me, maybe mid-40s, solid build, close-cropped hair going gray at the sides. He wore a Coast Guard utility uniform under a weathered jacket that looked like it had seen a lot of seasons out here. "Marshal Diaz?" he said. "Yeah. Carson Anderson, station chief." He didn't offer his hand, just nodded toward the buildings. "I'll walk you through the layout. Won't take long." I leaned the broom against the wall and followed him. Anderson moved fast. He didn't waste time on small talk or explanations that weren't directly necessary. We went through the main station first. He pointed out the communications room, the equipment storage, the backup generator, and a separate shed around the side. Everything was locked. He had keys on a ring clipped to his belt, but he didn't open anything, just gestured and kept walking. "You don't need access to these," he said. "Your job's exterior maintenance and the lighthouse lamp. That's it." "Got it." We crossed the gravel lot toward the Lighthouse Museum building, the one with the chains on the door. Anderson didn't slow down when we passed it. "Museum's closed for the season," he said. "Don't go in there." "Okay." He led me to a smaller shed near the cliff edge, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, with a metal door and no windows. A faded sign on the side said, "Radar equipment, authorized personnel only." Anderson stopped in front of the door but didn't touch it. He looked at the latch for a second, then kept talking. "This stays locked," he said. "You don't have a key and you don't need one. Don't try to open it." I was looking at the latch too. There were fresh gouges in the metal around the lock mechanism. Deep scratches, bright and raw where the paint had been scraped away. It looked like someone had gone at it with a pry bar or a screwdriver. Maybe both. The damage was new. No rust, no weathering. I waited for Anderson to say something about it. He was staring right at it. He didn't. He just turned and kept walking back toward the main building. I followed, but I kept glancing back at the shed. The gouges bothered me, not a lot, but enough. Someone had tried to force that door open, and recently. And Anderson had seen it and said nothing. We circled back to the tower, and Anderson stopped by his truck. He reached into the cab and pulled out a thin binder, maybe 20 pages, with a blue cover and laminated sheets inside. "This is your operations manual," he said, handing it to me. "Read it tonight. Follow it exactly." I took the binder. It was lighter than I expected. "The station only functions if the rules are followed," Anderson said. His voice didn't change, but something in the way he said it made me look up. "You do your job, follow the manual, don't deviate. Understood?" "Yeah." "You have a problem. You call the number on the inside cover. Don't try to fix anything yourself that isn't in your task list." "Okay." He opened the truck door, then paused and looked back at me. "Stay out of the buildings you don't have keys for," he said. "And don't go down to the beach after dark." I nodded. He got in the truck and started the engine. I stood there holding the binder while he backed up, turned around, and drove down the access road faster than seemed necessary. The taillights disappeared into the fog before I even heard the engine fade. That was it. He was gone. I walked back to the duplex with the binder under my arm. The wind was picking up, and the sky was getting darker, that early winter sunset that happens around 5. The foghorn sounded, and I checked my watch. 5:12. Inside, I set the binder on the desk in the corner and made coffee in the dented pot. While it brewed, I stood at the window looking out at the gray ocean and the gray sky and the lighter gray line where they met. I kept thinking about the gouges on the radar shed door. Fresh damage, metal on metal scratches. Someone had tried to pry it open and failed, or maybe succeeded and then locked it again. And Anderson had looked right at it and said nothing. Didn't mention it. Didn't ask if I'd seen anyone around. Didn't tell me to report anything suspicious. Just told me to stay out. I poured coffee into a chipped mug I'd found in the cupboard and sat down at the desk. The binder sat there with its blue cover and laminated pages. I opened it. The first page was a title sheet. Heseta Head Station, Seasonal Caretaker Operations Manual. Below that, in smaller print, Revised October, no year. The second page listed a phone number for emergencies and a second number for non-urgent issues. Both had the same area code. I flipped through the rest. Task lists, schedules, maintenance protocols. All of it printed in the same plain font on white paper, then laminated. Someone had hole-punched the sheets and put them in the binder with metal rings. The tasks were what Josephine had described. Sweep walkways. Check exterior locks. Test lighthouse lamp daily. Inspect perimeter fence weekly. Report damage or trespassing immediately using the provided number. There was a section on weather protocols. Another on generator operation, though it noted I shouldn't operate it myself. Just check that the shed door was secure. And there was a section called Restricted Areas. I read that part twice. It listed the buildings I wasn't supposed to enter: communications room, equipment storage, radar shed, museum. It didn't explain why, just said access was prohibited and violations would result in immediate contract termination. The last page had a note in bold. These guidelines exist for safety and operational integrity. Adherence is mandatory. I closed the binder and set it on the desk. Outside the window, the sky was almost dark. I could hear the ocean, a low, constant sound under the wind. The foghorn went off again, and I didn't bother checking my watch. I sat there drinking coffee that had gone lukewarm, thinking about the way Anderson had left. Fast, like he didn't want to be here after sunset. And I thought about the gouges on the radar shed door, and the way he'd looked right at them and said nothing. I was alone now. That was the deal. Minimal interaction, Josephine had said. Remote work. Just me and the buildings and the ocean and whatever had been trying to force its way into that shed. I finished the coffee and rinsed the mug in the sink. The binder sat on the desk with its rules and restricted areas and mandatory adherence, evidence that something had been forcing its way in, and a manual that told me to stay out and follow orders and not ask questions. That was it. That was what I had. The sun set somewhere behind all that fog around 5:30. I couldn't actually see it happen, just noticed the gray getting darker in stages. I walked out to the Lighthouse Museum building, still chained, still marked closed, and found the exterior switch mounted in a weatherproof box on the south wall. Flipped it up, heard a mechanical click from inside, then a low electrical hum. The lamp came on above me, cutting a slow rotating beam through the fog. White light, then darkness, then white again. It felt like turning on a very large appliance. I stood there watching it complete 2 full rotations, making sure it didn't flicker or die, then walked back to the duplex. The binder was still on the kitchen table where I'd left it. I made instant coffee in the dented pot, poured it into the cleanest mug I could find, and sat down with the manual open in front of me. I'd read the basics earlier: task lists, restricted areas, the bolded section about mandatory adherence. Now I went through it page by page, actually paying attention. The rules were weird, Not weird in a safety protocol way. Weird in a way that made my chest feel tight. Page 7 had a section called Evening Procedures that included normal stuff: lock exterior doors at dusk, confirm lighthouse lamp activation, secure loose equipment, standard caretaker tasks. But halfway down the page it said, if you hear tapping on glass after dark, do not respond. Do not open doors or windows. Wait 5 minutes, then resume normal activity. Just that. No explanation. No context about why someone might be tapping on glass at a remote coastal station, or what happened if you did open the door. I read it twice. Page 9 had another one. The Foghorn building contains operational equipment and one standing mirror. Do not look directly into the mirror between sunset and sunrise. If you must enter the building during these hours, keep your eyes on the equipment only. I hadn't even known there was a Foghorn building. I'd heard the Foghorn every day since I arrived, assumed it was automated from the main station. And what kind of operational manual warns you not to look in a mirror? That wasn't a safety rule. That was something else. Page 11. A red buoy light is visible approximately 200 yards offshore during clear conditions. If the light changes color or moves closer to shore, report immediately via the emergency contact number. Do not approach the water. I looked out the kitchen window. Couldn't see 200 yards through the fog. Couldn't see 20 yards, honestly. The ocean was out there. I could hear it. But the red buoy light could have been anything or nothing, and I wouldn't know. Page 14 had the cliff path warning. A trail descends the south cliff face to the beach below. This path is unstable and not maintained. Do not use it after sunset. If you hear voices or movement on the path at night, do not investigate. Remain inside until daylight. The coffee was getting cold in my hands. I set the mug down. Anderson had told me not to go to the beach after dark. He'd said it fast, like an afterthought, right before he drove away. Now the manual said the same thing but added, don't investigate if you hear people down there at night, which meant people did go down there, or something that sounded like people. I flipped back to page 7, read the tapping rule again. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. Text from Michelle. Marshall, I'm actually worried now. Just send me one text so I know you're alive. I put the phone face down on the table. The foghorn sounded. I checked my watch. 6:18. I'd been reading for maybe 20 minutes and my hands were already shaking a little. Not panic attack shaking. Just the kind of tension that builds up when you're trying to figure out if you're reading safety instructions or something else entirely. I turned to page 15. That's when I heard it. 3 taps on the kitchen window. Steady, evenly spaced. Deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. Not frantic tapping. Not wind-blown debris hitting glass. 3 controlled knocks. The kind you'd use on a neighbor's door. Polite. Patient. My chest tightened. I kept my eyes on the binder. On page 15. On the words I wasn't reading anymore. The tapping came again. Same rhythm, same window. Tap, tap, tap. I forced myself to breathe, counted it out the way I'd learned after the Target break room. 4 seconds in, hold 4, 4 seconds out. I'd found the technique on some free anxiety website during the week I spent in my apartment not answering Jasmine's calls. It worked maybe 60% of the time. I looked at my watch. 6:21. The manual said wait 5 minutes. Don't respond. Don't open doors or windows. My hand wanted to pull the curtain back. Wanted to see what was out there. That's the normal human response, right? Someone knocks. You check. You look. You open the door or at least call out, "Who's there?" But the manual said don't. And Anderson had looked at those fresh gouges on the radar shed like he was pretending they didn't exist. I kept breathing, kept watching the second hand on my watch. The tapping stopped. I waited, didn't move. The duplex was silent except for the wind outside and the hum of the mini fridge in the corner. At 6:26, I stood up, slow, and stepped to the window, lifted the edge of the curtain with 2 fingers. Nothing. Wet boards on the small deck outside the kitchen, fog pressing against the glass. Darkness pooled in the corners where the lighthouse beam didn't reach. No person, no animal, no branch swinging in the wind. I let the curtain drop. My coffee was cold. I poured it down the sink, rinsed the mug, set it in the drying rack. My hands were steadier now. The breathing thing had worked. I left the binder on the table, went upstairs to the bedroom, and sat on the edge of the bed where I could see the lighthouse lamp through the window. The beam rotated past every 8 seconds. White light sweeping across fog, then gone, then back again. I watched it for a while. It felt like keeping an eye on it mattered. Like if I looked away, something might go wrong with the rotation, or the light might stop, or the whole system might collapse. Which was stupid. It was automated. It didn't need me staring at it, but I kept watching anyway. I lay down eventually, still dressed, boots still on, pulled the wool blanket over my legs. The foghorn sounded again at 6:47, then 7:16, then 7:43. Irregular intervals. I stopped checking my watch after a while. Sleep came in pieces. I'd drift off, then wake up when the foghorn blasted, then drift again. The wind picked up around 9, rattling the window in its frame. I heard something scrape across the roof. Probably a branch, maybe part of a shingle, but I didn't get up to check. At some point, I actually slept. Then the foghorn changed. I opened my eyes, checked my watch. 11:53. The foghorn had always been the same, low, steady 3-second blasts, but now the pitch was wrong, higher, strained, like the mechanism was struggling. I sat up. It sounded again, definitely higher and shorter, maybe 2 seconds instead of 3. Then it cut off mid-blast. I waited, watched the second hand on my watch tick past 12, past 15 seconds, past 30. Nothing. The wind was still going. I could hear the ocean down below the cliff. But the foghorn had stopped completely. 12:40 a.m. The silence felt wrong. Heavy. Like the absence of sound was its own presence pressing down on the duplex. I stood up. Told myself I was just going to look out the window. Just check. That was reasonable. That was fine. But my boots were already on, and I was already moving toward the stairs. I grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer, the one with the heavy rubber casing and the strap I didn't use. It felt solid when I clicked it on, and the beam cut white across the living room wall. The rain started while I was putting on my jacket. Not heavy, but steady, the kind that soaks through after a minute or two. I could hear it hitting the roof and the windows. The foghorn was still silent. 12:47 on my watch. I stepped outside and the wind hit me immediately, cold and damp and carrying salt smell from the ocean below. The lighthouse beam swept past overhead, lighting up the rain in streaks. I pulled my hood up and walked toward the foghorn building. The building sat about 50 yards from the duplex, closer to the cliff edge. Small and square with peeling white paint and a metal door. I'd walked past it maybe 6 times during my daily perimeter checks, but never went inside. Didn't have a reason to. The manual said the foghorn was automated and I wasn't supposed to touch operational equipment. The door had a keypad lock, 4 digits. I tried 3729, same code as the duplex lockbox. The light blinked red. I tried it again slower. Still red. I stood there in the rain for probably 15 seconds just staring at the keypad. My phone was back in the duplex. Dead battery. I could go back, plug it in, wait 20 minutes for enough charge to call the emergency number. But that felt stupid. The foghorn wasn't an emergency. It was just broken. I tried 0000, red light. Then I tried the handle and it turned. Unlocked the whole time. Inside smelled like machine oil and damp concrete. The flashlight beam showed a narrow room with gray walls and a metal shelving unit holding coiled cables and plastic bins. The foghorn mechanism took up most of the back wall, a big, cylindrical unit with vents and warning labels. I didn't know how it worked and didn't want to mess with it. The breaker panel was on the left wall, gray metal box with a hinged door. I opened it and saw 2 rows of switches, all labeled in faded marker. Most were in the up position. One near the bottom right was flipped down. It said Foghorn Primary in letters so worn I had to angle the flashlight to read them. I flipped it back up. The panel hummed. Then the foghorn mechanism kicked on with a mechanical groan that made me step back. 3 seconds later, the horn blasted and I felt it in my ribs and teeth. Same deep sound as before. Same 3-second duration. That was it. Problem solved. I closed the breaker panel door and swept the flashlight across the room one more time to make sure I hadn't missed anything. The beam hit something shiny on the right wall and I stopped. It was a metal strip, maybe 8 inches wide and 3 feet tall, bolted directly to the concrete. Polished steel or aluminum, reflecting the flashlight beam in a hard, flat way that hurt to look at. Above it, someone had written "Mirror" in black marker on the wall. I stared at it. Not a real mirror, just a strip of shiny metal. But the manual said there was a standing mirror in the Foghorn building. Said not to look directly into it between sunset and sunrise. This wasn't a standing mirror. This was a piece of metal bolted to a wall. I kept the flashlight on it for a few more seconds. My reflection showed up warped and stretched in the curve of the surface. Just my jacket and the dark shape of my head. Nothing weird. Nothing moving that shouldn't move. I turned away and left the building, pulling the door shut behind me. The foghorn sounded again at 12:51 while I was walking back to the duplex. Regular interval, regular pitch, fixed. Inside, I shook the rain off my jacket and hung it on the hook by the door. My boots left wet prints on the floor. I didn't care. The foghorn was working again and I could go back to bed and stop thinking about breaker panels and metal strips with "Mirror" written above them. I sat down on the couch, pulled the blanket over my legs. The lighthouse beam rotated past the window every 8 seconds and I watched it twice, then closed my eyes. Then I remembered the red buoy light, 12:59 a.m. on my watch. The manual said to check if the light changed color or moved closer to shore, said to report it immediately if it did. I hadn't checked, hadn't even thought about it. I'd been dealing with the foghorn, and now I was sitting on the couch with my eyes closed, like the day was over. My phone was still dead on the kitchen table. Probably had another 10 minutes before it charged enough to turn on. I could wait, go to sleep, check the buoy in the morning during my perimeter walk. But the manual said immediately. I stood up and went to the kitchen. The phone screen was still black when I pressed the button. I set it back down. The buoy light was in the manual's supply list. Emergency signaling equipment stored in the front closet next to the door. I opened the closet and found it on the top shelf, behind a coil of rope and a plastic bin of batteries. Heavy rectangular case with a handle and a cracked Coast Guard decal on the side. I carried it to the porch and set it down on the wet boards. The case had a latch that popped open when I pressed it. Inside was a battery-powered lamp unit with a red lens and a metal stand that folded out. I pulled it out, extended the stand, and flicked the switch on the side. The light came on, dull red circle that barely reached the porch railing. Not bright, just enough to see by if you were standing close. I looked out toward the ocean. The fog was still thick, but the rain had slowed to a drizzle. The lighthouse beam swept past and lit up the cliff edge and the path that led down to the beach. For a second I could see the museum gate and the trees beyond it. Empty. Just wet grass and gravel and the dark shape of the chained building. Then the beam moved on and everything went dark again, except for the red glow from the buoy light at my feet. I waited, counted to 10. The beam came back around. This time I saw the figure, near the museum gate, maybe 30 yards away. standing completely still, facing the ocean. Tall and narrow with a dark coat or jacket. No umbrella, no flashlight, just standing there in the rain. The lighthouse beam moved past and the figure disappeared into shadow. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The red light from the buoy threw a circle on the boards in front of me, and I stared at where the figure had been, waiting for the beam to come back. 8 seconds. The lighthouse rotated slow and steady. The foghorn sounded at 1:03, and I flinched but kept my eyes on the gate. The beam swept back around. The figure was still there, hadn't moved, still facing the ocean with that same rigid posture. But the head was different now, turned slightly, not toward the ocean anymore, toward the porch, toward the red light. The beam moved on and I lost sight of it again. My hands were shaking. I realized I'd left the flashlight inside on the kitchen counter. Went back in to get it without thinking, just moving on autopilot. Grabbed it and came back out to the porch. The red buoy light was still throwing its dull circle on the boards. The figure was still out there somewhere in the dark. The manual said to stay inside if I heard voices or movement at night. Said not to investigate. Said to wait until daylight. But this wasn't voices. This was a person standing in the rain at 1 a.m. near a closed government facility. That didn't make sense. People didn't just show up here. The access road was gated. The whole point of this job was that nobody came out here. I needed to know if it was real. I stepped off the porch onto the gravel. The rain hit my face and I raised my voice toward the gate. "Hey!" My voice came out smaller than I wanted, got swallowed by the wind and the ocean noise. I tried again, louder. "Hey! You're not supposed to be here." I turned on the flashlight and waved it toward the museum gate. The beam cut through the fog and rain, sweeping across wet grass and gravel. I couldn't see the figure anymore. Just empty ground and the dark shape of the chained building and the trees beyond. I kept waving the flashlight, back and forth, trying to catch movement, trying to see something that would prove I hadn't imagined it. The lighthouse beam came around again and lit up the whole area for 3 seconds. Nobody there. Just the gate and the building and the path leading down toward the cliff. I stood there with the flashlight in my hand, breathing hard, rain soaking through my hood. The red buoy light glowed behind me on the porch. The foghorn sounded at 1:07. The figure was gone. The figure didn't walk. That's the part that stuck with me, standing there in the rain with the flashlight beam cutting through nothing. It moved closer, but not in steps. More like it was being pulled forward, sliding. I don't know how else to describe it. 1 second it was near the museum gate, the next it was maybe 20 yards away, and I hadn't seen it cross the distance. The buoy light on the porch flickered behind me. Just once. A quick dim and then back to full red. And that's when it hit me. The manual said to report if the buoy light moved closer to shore. Not moved away, closer. The red light wasn't keeping things away from the station. It was guiding them in. I grabbed the buoy light off the stand. The metal was cold enough to sting my palm even through the rain. The red glow died immediately when I yanked the power cord free. I didn't look back at where the figure had been. I just ran. Boots slipping on wet gravel, the buoy light case banging against my leg, flashlight beam jumping everywhere. I made it up the porch steps and through the duplex door in maybe 4 seconds, slammed it behind me, twisted the deadbolt, put my back against the wood and tried to breathe. The foghorn sounded at 1:11, except it didn't sound right. The pitch was wrong again, deeper, strained, that same struggling tone from earlier when it cut out, like the mechanism was working too hard or something was jamming it. The blast lasted maybe 2 seconds instead of 3 and ended with a grinding noise I felt more than heard. I set the buoy light on the floor by my feet. Water dripped off my jacket onto the boards. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was just cold and adrenaline, which was probably true but didn't make them stop. The hallway stretched in front of me, dark except for the faint glow from the kitchen where I'd left one light on. And through the kitchen window I could see the foghorn building outside, maybe 50 yards away. The door was still open. I'd left it open when I ran out to check the buoy light. The manual said to secure all doors at dusk, but that wasn't what made me freeze. The metal strip on the wall inside the foghorn building was reflecting light, a soft, reddish glow. I could see it from here through the open door and the kitchen window, except the porch light was off. I knew it was off because I never turned it on. The only light source had been the buoy lamp, and I'd just killed that. So, what was the strip reflecting? I stepped into the hallway. My boots left wet prints on the floor. The kitchen light hummed. Through the window, the foghorn building sat there with its door hanging open and that wrong glow coming from inside. The manual said not to look directly into the mirror between sunset and sunrise. If I had to enter, keep my eyes on equipment only. I walked toward the kitchen. Told myself I was just going to close the window blinds. That was it. Just pull the cord and block the view and deal with the open foghorn building door in the morning when the sun was up and things made sense again. I got to the window, put my hand on the blind cord. The red glow in the foghorn building pulsed once, brighter, then back to dim. I was still holding the buoy light, still powered off, still dark. I looked down at the unit in my hand, then back at the foghorn building, then down at the buoy light again. I'd brought it inside. The red glow was coming from inside the duplex somewhere, reflecting out through the foghorn building's mirror strip. The binder was still on the kitchen table where I'd left it. 20 laminated pages of rules and warnings and mandatory adherence. Don't look at the mirror after dark. Don't respond to tapping. Don't go to the beach. Don't ask questions about fresh gouges on locked doors. I walked out of the kitchen, down the hallway toward the front door. The buoy light hung heavy in my grip. The foghorn building door was still open. I could see it clearly now without the window glass between us. The metal strip on the right wall caught the faint red glow and threw it back, warped, stretched. I stepped onto the porch. Rain hit my face immediately, cold and sharp. The foghorn building was maybe 40 feet away. I shouldn't have walked toward it. I knew that even while I was doing it. The manual said, keep your eyes on equipment. Anderson said, follow the rules exactly. Don't deviate. But the red glow was coming from inside my duplex and reflecting in that strip, and I needed to know why. I crossed the gravel. My boots crunched loud enough to hear over the rain. The foghorn building's doorway was a black rectangle with the metal strip visible on the right wall, catching light that shouldn't exist. I stepped inside. The air smelled like oil and salt and something else. Something organic. Seaweed, maybe. The strip was 3 feet tall and 8 inches wide. Polished metal bolted to the wall with mirror, written above it in marker. I'd seen my reflection in it earlier, warped but recognizable. I looked at it now. The red glow was definitely there, soft and pulsing, coming from behind me even though the buoy light in my hand was off and there was no other light source. I leaned closer, just a few inches, just enough to see. For a fraction of a second, the reflection showed someone standing behind me. Carson Anderson. Close-cropped hair, weathered jacket, brown eyes, smiling. Not a friendly smile, not a professional smile. Something else. Something that made my stomach drop. I spun around, fast enough that my shoulder hit the doorframe. The room was empty, just me and the shelves and the foghorn mechanism humming against the back wall. Nobody behind me, nobody in the doorway. Nobody anywhere. I turned back to the strip. The reflection had changed. It wasn't showing the foghorn building anymore. It was showing a hallway. Long and narrow with the same gray walls as this building, but stretching back further than the room's actual dimensions allowed. And at the end of that hallway was the red glow, brighter now, pulsing in rhythm with something I couldn't hear. The buoy light was in my hand, powered off. But in the reflection it was on, sitting on the floor of that impossible hallway, throwing red light up the walls. I'd brought it inside. I'd killed the porch placement early and brought the buoy light into the duplex, and now it was active in a space that didn't exist. Something moved in the reflection, low on the metal surface, near the bottom edge. A handprint, wet. Fingers spread wide. It wasn't there, and then it was, crawling up the metal strip 1 inch at a time. The water it left behind wasn't clear. It was black, thick. When it dripped down the surface, it left streaks that looked like salt deposits but moved wrong. Too slow, too deliberate. I stepped back. My heel hit the doorframe again. The handprint kept climbing, up past the halfway point, up toward the mirror text. The black streaks followed it like veins. I thought about the gouges on the radar shed door, fresh and deep, bright metal showing through where paint had been scraped away. Anderson had looked right at them, stood there for 3 full seconds staring at the damage and said nothing, like acknowledging it would make it real. The manual had rules for everything. Times to lock doors, times to avoid mirrors, times to stay away from the beach. Specific instructions down to the minute. Timing locks, not combination locks or key locks. Timing locks. The shed door could only be opened at certain times, or couldn't be opened at certain times, and someone had tried to force it anyway, leaving gouges where they'd failed. Entry points. The rules weren't just safety protocols, they were security measures, ways to keep things out, or keep things in. I'd ended the buoy light placement early, brought it inside when it was supposed to stay on the porch until a specific time, broken the sequence. And now something was using the red glow I'd brought inside to move through a hallway that didn't exist. I needed to fix it, put the buoy light back outside, reset the placement, follow the manual's instructions exactly like Anderson said. I turned toward the duplex. The buoy light felt heavier now. The red lens caught the faint glow from the kitchen window. I walked fast across the gravel, up the porch steps, reached for the door handle, and stopped. The cliff path was crowded, maybe 15 figures standing in the rain, all wearing dark coats or rain gear, all facing the duplex. Facing me. They were maybe 10 yards away, close enough that the lighthouse beam's next rotation would light them clearly. I could see their outlines, their shapes, the way they stood perfectly still despite the wind. The lighthouse beam swept past. Their faces were smooth, not masked, not hidden, just smooth, like skin pulled tight over nothing. No eyes, no mouths, no features at all. Just blank surfaces where faces should be. The beam passed and they disappeared into shadow. I grabbed the door handle and yanked it open, stumbled inside, slammed the door hard enough that the frame shook, twisted the deadbolt, stepped back. The tapping started immediately. 3 knocks, steady and evenly spaced, but not on the window this time. On the roof, directly above my head. 3 more taps. Moving, scraping across shingles toward the back of the duplex, toward the chimney. I stood in the hallway with the buoy light in my hand and the deadbolt locked and the tapping moving across the roof in groups of 3, and I finally understood that the manual's rules weren't suggestions. They were the only things keeping the doors closed. I didn't think. I just moved. The Foghorn building door was still open. I crossed the gravel in maybe 10 steps, went inside, and looked around for anything I could use to block the entrance. The shelving units were bolted to the wall. The Foghorn mechanism was too heavy to shift. I spotted a metal folding chair in the corner behind a plastic bin, grabbed it, dragged it to the doorway, and wedged the back under the handle at an angle. It wasn't much. Probably wouldn't stop anything determined, but it made me feel slightly less like I'd left a door wide open for whatever was using that metal strip. The strip was still reflecting that impossible hallway. The red glow pulsed at the far end, steady and rhythmic. I could see the buoy light sitting on the floor in the reflection, even though the actual buoy light was inside the duplex on my hallway floor, unplugged and dark. I needed to cover it, block it out, stop looking at it. I went back to the duplex, moved fast through the hallway, grabbed a dish towel from the kitchen drawer, white with faded blue stripes, kind of rough, and returned to the Foghorn building. The handprint was still there on the metal strip, black water streaks dripping down in slow motion. I pressed the towel over the entire surface and used the roll of duct tape I'd seen on the shelf to secure the edges. 4 strips across the top, 3 down each side, 2 on the bottom. The reflection disappeared behind cotton fabric. The red glow bled through slightly, a dull wash of color, but I couldn't see the hallway anymore. That helped. A little. I checked my watch. 12:59. The tapping on the roof had stopped. I didn't know when. I'd been too focused on the strip to notice. I stood there, breathing hard, looking at the covered metal, and then I remembered the lighthouse lamp. The manual said to confirm activation every evening, but it didn't say anything about checking the power levels. I figured there had to be a gauge somewhere. The lamp was automated. Automated systems had monitoring equipment. I left the Foghorn building, chair still wedged under the door handle, and walked toward the Lighthouse Museum building. The rain had eased to a drizzle. The beam kept rotating overhead, white light cutting through fog every 8 seconds. I found a metal access panel on the north side of the building, below the lamp housing, with a small window showing a needle gauge inside. I wiped rain off the glass with my sleeve and leaned close. The needle sat just above the red zone, maybe 10% remaining. That didn't make sense. The generator was supposed to run for weeks without refueling. I'd only been here a few days. The manual said the lamp drew minimal power. The system was designed for long-term operation with low maintenance. I stared at the needle, watched it tremble slightly, and understood. Something was drawing power through the mirror. The reflection wasn't passive, it was active. It was using the station's electrical system to stay open, to keep that hallway lit, to let things move through. The gauge dropped another fraction while I stood there. Maybe 0.5%. Small enough that I might have imagined it, but I didn't think I did. I checked my watch again. 1:03. The foghorn sounded. Wrong pitch, strained. 2 seconds instead of 3. I went back to the duplex and stood in the hallway staring at the buoy light on the floor. The manual said to set it outside, to activate it, to report if the red light moved closer to shore. I'd brought it inside. I'd unplugged it. I'd broken the sequence. And now the foghorn was failing, the generator was draining, and 15 faceless figures were standing in the rain 10 yards from my front door. I needed to fix it. I needed to put the buoy light back. My hands were shaking again. I used the 4-second breathing thing, in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, and it didn't help much, but I kept doing it anyway. I bent down, picked up the buoy light with both hands, and carried it to the front door. It was heavier than I remembered. The red lens was cold and slick with condensation. I unlocked the deadbolt, turned the handle, opened the door maybe 6 inches. The shapes were closer now, not 10 yards, maybe 7. Still standing perfectly still in the rain, all facing the duplex, all wearing dark coats or jackets that hung wrong on their frames. The lighthouse beam swept past and I saw their faces again. Smooth blank surfaces with no features, just skin pulled tight over nothing. I kept my eyes on the porch boards. Didn't look up, didn't look at them directly. I stepped outside, set the buoy light down on the same spot where I'd grabbed it earlier, and extended the stand with fingers that barely worked. The metal legs scraped against wet wood. I fumbled with the power cord, found the connection point, plugged it back in. The red light activated. Dull glow spreading across the porch railing and into the rain. I heard wet fabric then, shifting, scraping. The sound of soles dragging across gravel, slow and deliberate, moving closer. I kept my eyes on the boards, on my boots, on the red circle of light around the buoy lamp. The scraping got louder, closer. I could hear breathing now, or something that sounded like breathing but wrong, too wet, too rhythmic, like air moving through a space that wasn't shaped right for it. One of them was maybe 3 feet away. I could see the edge of a dark coat in my peripheral vision, just outside the red glow. I backed toward the door, slow, 1 step, 2 steps. My hand found the door frame. The foghorn sounded again at 1:07. Same strained pitch, same shortened duration. The grinding noise at the end was worse now, metal on metal, something failing inside the mechanism. I stepped inside, pulled the door shut, twisted the deadbolt, and stood there with my back against the wood, breathing too fast. The tapping started again immediately. 3 knocks, steady, evenly spaced, moving across the roof toward the back of the duplex. I went to the kitchen, grabbed the binder off the table, and started flipping through pages. There had to be something, some instruction I'd missed, some procedure for when things went wrong. Page 7, evening procedures. Tapping on glass, don't respond, wait 5 minutes. Page 9, foghorn building. Mirror, don't look directly between sunset and sunrise. Page 11, red buoy light, report if it moves closer to shore. Page 14, cliff path. Don't use after sunset, don't investigate voices or movement. Nothing about what to do if you broke the rules, nothing about how to fix it. I turned to the back of the binder. Page 19 was the last page with text, the bolded note about adherence being mandatory. Page 20 was blank except for a footer in small print at the bottom. Mirror mount hardware, stainless steel, corrosion resistant, 2-bolt secure fixture. See maintenance appendix for replacement specifications. I read that twice. 2-bolt secure fixture. I thought about the metal strip on the wall. 8 inches wide, 3 feet tall, bolted to the wall with mirror written above it in marker. Not a standing mirror. A mounted strip. Removable. I grabbed the flashlight off the counter, went back outside into the rain, crossed the gravel to the foghorn building, and pushed the door open past the wedged chair. The towel was still taped over the metal strip. The red glow bled through the fabric, brighter now, pulsing faster. I tore the towel down, duct tape ripping free, leaving sticky residue, and looked at the reflection. The impossible hallway was full of them now. Faceless shapes in dark coats, standing shoulder to shoulder, filling the narrow space from wall to wall. They were closer than before, maybe 20 feet back from the strip's surface, and they were moving, slow, deliberate, walking toward me. I could see the front one clearly, tall, no features, head tilted slightly to the right. It raised one hand and pressed it against the inside of the reflection. Black water spread from the contact point, fingers splayed wide. I stepped back, hit the shelving unit, and knocked a plastic bin onto the floor. It clattered loud enough to make me flinch. The figure in front kept pressing. The metal strip vibrated. I could feel it in the floor, a low hum building in the walls. 2-bolt secure fixture. I turned and scanned the shelving until I found a toolbox on the second shelf. Red metal, handle bent, latches rusted. I flipped it open and grabbed the first wrench that looked like it might fit. Adjustable. Heavy. Good enough. I knelt down next to the strip and found the bolts. One at the top right corner, one at the bottom left. Both were standard hex heads, maybe half an inch across, with flat washers underneath. The metal strip vibrated harder. The hum got louder. I fitted the wrench over the top bolt and turned counterclockwise. It didn't move. I adjusted my grip, braced my other hand against the wall, and pulled harder. The bolt broke free with a metallic squeal. The strip lurched, just a fraction of an inch, like something on the other side had pushed. I moved to the bottom bolt, fitted the wrench, and turned. This one came loose easier. 3 full rotations and it dropped into my palm, still warm. The metal strip fell forward into my hands. It was heavier than it should have been. way heavier, like I was holding something under tremendous load, something pulling from the other side, dragging it down. My arms shook. I almost dropped it. The reflection was still active. I could see the hallway, the shapes, the red glow at the far end. All of it contained in the strip's surface, even though it was no longer mounted to the wall. I turned and carried it toward the door, angling it downward so I didn't have to look at the reflection directly. My shoulders burned. My hands cramped around the edges. I stepped outside into the rain, crossed the gravel, and climbed the porch steps. The buoy light was still glowing red, throwing light up the railing and across the boards. I set the metal strip down flat on the porch directly under the buoy light, reflection facing up. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then at 1:06, the buoy light shut off on its own. The red glow died. The strip flashed once, bright white, almost blinding, and I saw every figure in the reflection fold inward toward the center, collapsing into the surface, pulled down into the metal as if it were water instead of steel. The pressure stopped. The vibration in the floor cut out. The air felt lighter, thinner, easier to breathe. The foghorn sounded at 1:09. Normal pitch. Full 3-second duration. No grinding, no strain. I stood on the porch in the rain, staring at the metal strip. The reflection was just a reflection now. I could see the porch ceiling, the railing, the edge of my boot. Nothing else. I checked my watch. 1:11. The lighthouse beams swept past overhead. I looked toward the cliff path where the 15 figures had been standing. Nobody there, just wet grass and gravel and fog. I picked up the metal strip, normal weight now, maybe 5 pounds, and carried it back to the Foghorn building. I left it leaning against the wall inside, grabbed the chair, and pulled the door shut behind me. Back in the duplex, I checked the lighthouse lamp gauge. The needle had stopped dropping. Still low, maybe 8%, but steady. I went inside, locked the deadbolt, took off my wet jacket, and sat on the couch with the blanket pulled over my legs. The foghorn sounded at 1:43. Normal. I didn't sleep. At dawn, the rain stopped and the fog thinned enough to see the ocean. Gray water, white foam, rocks below the cliff edge. I made coffee in the dented pot and drank it standing at the kitchen window. Then I walked outside to check the perimeter. Standard routine, same as every morning. The radar shed was near the cliff edge, same as always. I walked past it, stopped, and looked at the door. The fresh gouges were gone. The metal around the lock mechanism was smooth and painted. No scratches, no bright bare metal, no evidence anyone had ever tried to pry it open. I stared at it for maybe 30 seconds. Then I kept walking. Back at the duplex, I opened the binder to page 20. The footer about the mirror mount hardware was still there, but page 18, the waiver page I'd skimmed on my first read-through, the one about assuming risks and releasing the Coast Guard from liability, was blank now. Just white laminated paper with a page number in the corner. I closed the binder and set it on the table. At 9:15, I heard a truck engine. Carson Anderson's white government truck pulled into the gravel lot and parked near the tower. 2 other people got out with him, a woman and a younger guy, both wearing Coast Guard uniforms under rain gear. I met them outside the duplex. Didn't say anything, just stood there. Anderson looked at me, then passed me toward the porch. His eyes stopped on the boards where I'd set the metal strip down under the buoy light. The wood was disturbed there, scrape marks, wet streaks, a faint outline where the strip had rested. He looked at the Foghorn building next. The door was closed, but the chair was still visible through the window, lying on its side where I'd left it. Then he looked at me again. "Contract's over," he said. I opened my mouth, closed it, didn't ask why. The woman, Danielle, I heard Anderson call her, stepped forward. "You'll need to pack your belongings. We'll supervise and escort you off-site." "Now?" I said. "Now," Anderson said. The younger guy, Easton, followed me inside while I packed. He didn't talk, just stood in the doorway watching while I stuffed clothes into my duffel bags, unplugged my laptop, gathered toiletries from the bathroom. It took maybe 20 minutes. I left the binder on the kitchen table, left the key in the lockbox by the door, walked out carrying both duffels and the grocery bag with my remaining food. Anderson was waiting by my car. Danielle stood near the duplex porch, arms crossed, watching. You're free to go, Anderson said. Your stipend will be prorated and mailed. What happened? I asked. He didn't answer, just looked at me with the same controlled expression he'd had when he looked at the gouges on the radar shed door during his first visit. I put my bags in the trunk, got in the driver's seat, started the engine. Anderson stepped back and Danielle moved toward the duplex entrance. Easton came out carrying the metal strip, holding it carefully with both hands. I put the car in reverse, backed out of the gravel lot, and drove down the access road toward the highway. In the rearview mirror, I saw Anderson standing next to his truck, watching me leave. The lighthouse beam rotated overhead even though it was full daylight now. The foghorn sounded once as I reached the gate. I turned onto Highway 101 and drove south. I didn't have a job anymore, didn't have an apartment, had maybe $800 in my account, and no plan past getting away from Heceta Head. But I understood something now. The rules in the manual weren't arbitrary. They were containment protocols. And I'd broken them, brought the buoy light inside, uncovered the mirror, moved the strip. But in breaking them, I'd also ended whatever was using the station as an entry point. The gouges were gone. The waiver was blank. The figures had folded back into the metal and disappeared. I'd fixed it. And fixing it had cost me the only job I'd been able to hold without panicking. I drove for 2 hours before I stopped for gas, didn't check my phone, didn't think about what came next, just kept driving south with my bags in the trunk and no clear answers about what I'd actually seen or why Anderson had ended the contract without explanation. That was it. I was done.